Question number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. Is it correct that Table 1.1 of the 2016 Budget Economic and Fiscal Update shows inflation rising faster than nominal wages in the next 2 financial years?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, yes, but of course that depends on the inflation forecast turning into reality. And I'd have to say to the member, over the last few years that wasn't the case, and the effect of that has been that over the last 5 years the average annual wage has risen 14% and inflation rose by 4.7%.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Why is his government delivering falling real wages to New Zealanders over the next 2 years?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'll just remind the member of the figures for the last 5 years, where real wage increases were delivered by the economy, 14.1% increase in the average wage and 4.7% increase in inflation. So wages have risen faster than inflation. Whether they continue to do so will depend on whether the inflation forecasts come right. As the member knows, there's a connection between wage increases and inflation, and my guess is that if inflation's higher, wage increases will be bigger.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker.
The supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Will he meet his election promise that the average wage would rise to $62,000 by 2018?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's an election next year, as I understand it, and the promise of that would be more the same, and that is an economy growing about faster than most developed countries, delivering moderate and consistent wage increases. We don't promise some specific level of income, because if we could, we'd promise it's much bigger than what they've got now.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
In light of that answer, why did he promise at the last election that the average wage would rise to $62,000 by 2018?
The
Mr. Speaker,
Honourable Bill English.
If the member regards Treasury's forecasts as promises by a political party, then he's not fit to be the finance spokesman.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Does the budget now indicate that the average wage will be $59,400 by 2018? And where should working New Zealanders go looking for the missing $2,600 from his election promise? And please don't blame the Auckland Council for this.
The Honourable Bill
Mr.
English.
Speaker, well, as I pointed out to the member, if the Labor Party finance spokesman regards forecasts of average wage as a guarantee by government that that's what will happen, he simply doesn't understand how an economy works, and I'd say that's a risk for the Labor Party.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. Order. Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
If believing Treasury forecasts makes you incapable of being the Minister of Finance, why did he use a Treasury forecast to promise New Zealanders an average wage of $62,000 by 2018?
Don't make it up.
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've dealt with that issue in the last couple of questions. What has actually happened in this economy is inflation has turned out to be quite a lot lower than anyone expected. And until now, wage earners have benefited from that, because on average, wage increases have been considerably higher than inflation. Over the next few years, it's still uncertain as to whether inflation will pick up at the rate specified in the forecasts and to whether wage increases will continue at the rate that they have. No one can be quite sure. Treasury has published its forecasts. They've been wrong about inflation for the last 2 or 3 years. They might be in the next 2 or 3 years.
Order. Order. Supplementary question, right Honourable Prime
Minister of Finance, what was the Treasury forecast approximately of the budget surplus or deficit in budget 2015, and what was the actual result that the country enjoyed?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the forecast would have been something like minus 700 million, and it turned out to be higher.
Order. 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 Question number 5.